She no longer needed men to buy her dinner. But the habit of using people had done its damage before the need for the habit had ended. A person can change their budget faster than they can change their spirit. The men continued to come and go. Some wanted beauty without depth, and she gave them beauty without depth, and those relationships ended the way they were designed to end. Some wanted genuine companionship, but detected her selfishness too quickly, the way a mechanic hears a knock in an engine before the owner does. They left with varying degrees of frustration. One man, a contractor named Victor, 38, steady and unassuming, who had treated her with consistent and straightforward kindness for 4 months, said when he ended things, "I wanted a partner, Jennifer. You want an arrangement. I don't think you even know you're doing it." She had wanted to argue with him. She hadn't been able to. Some men were beneath what she wanted financially, and she dismissed them before giving them a real chance, measuring their earning potential against some internal spreadsheet that had nothing to do with love. Others were promising, educated, employed, presentable, interested, but by now Jennifer carried not only habits but baggage. The years of transactional dating had left residue. Disappointment had sharpened her. Regret, which she rarely allowed herself to fully feel, had made her defensive. She became more demanding as she became less certain she deserved what she demanded. She interpreted interest as neediness and withdrew from warmth the way someone conditioned to small spaces withdraws from open rooms. She was wiser in certain ways, about money, about work, about navigating institutions that were not designed with her in mind. But wisdom about the world does not automatically produce wisdom about the self. Those are different educations, and they run on different timetables. She turned 35. She threw herself a small dinner party with Kezia and Tamra and 2 colleagues from work. They drank good wine and laughed loudly, and Jennifer felt, for most of the evening, genuinely content. She was not the woman she had been at 28. She was clearer, calmer, more settled in her professional identity. She just hadn't figured out the rest of it yet. She started seeing Isaiah again, not with her, just in life, which in Atlanta was possible in a way it might not be in a larger city. The same gyms, the same grocery stores, the same cluster of good restaurants within 5 miles of each other. At the gym first. She was on the treadmill when she saw him arrive, drop his bag, and settle into his warm-up with the same composed focus he brought to everything. He was on the rowing machine, headphones in, looking somehow even better than she remembered. The years had been kind to him in the particular way they are kind to men who take care of themselves. He noticed her after 20 minutes and nodded, a polite, unloaded nod. She nodded back and spent the rest of her workout acutely aware of his presence. She saw him at the bank 2 months later in a navy blazer, speaking to a teller with the measured patience of a man who had enough time not to rush anyone. Then at a new restaurant that had opened in Midtown, the kind of place that required a reservation weeks out and that Jennifer had secured through a colleague who knew someone. She was there with a man named Bradley, a financial analyst she had been seeing for 6 weeks, who was pleasant and generous and about whom she felt almost nothing. She was halfway through her entree when she looked across the room and saw Isaiah seated at a table near the window. He was not alone. The woman across from Isaiah was the kind of beautiful that announced itself quietly rather than loudly, not performing, not competing, simply present. She was tall, with a full figure that she carried with the ease of someone who had made peace with her body rather than waged war on it. She wore a deep burgundy wrap dress that was elegant without straining toward elegance. Her natural hair was styled simply, a low and full shape that complemented her face without demanding attention. Her makeup was polished but understated. But it was not her appearance that stopped Jennifer mid-chew. It was the way she moved through the conversation. Jennifer could not hear what they were saying across the room, but she could see the choreography. The woman leaning forward at certain moments, fully present, Not performing attentiveness, but actually attentive. She laughed with her whole face, not the careful, measured laugh Jennifer had cultivated for dates. She reached across the table at one point and touched Isaiah's forearm lightly, not possessively, not theatrically, just warmly, the way people touch each other when they have forgotten to be careful because they are comfortable. Isaiah responded to her with the softness Jennifer had spent 4 dates trying to unlock. He seemed lighter, more at ease. And then the check came. Jennifer watched, her own fork suspended halfway between her plate and her mouth. Before Isaiah even reached for the check, before his hand completed the automatic gesture of a man prepared to pay, the woman at the window table opened her purse. Not as a performance, not as a statement about independence or equality or anything that needed a name. She opened her purse with the simple ease of someone who wanted to do a thing and did it. She smiled at Isaiah, not triumphantly, not with calculation, and said something Jennifer could not hear. Paid without fuss. Closed her purse. Isaiah did not look diminished. He looked cherished. There was a word Jennifer hadn't thought to aim for. Not impressed, not conquered, cherished. Bradley said something across their own table. Jennifer replied automatically, whatever the correct social response was, and then looked down at her plate and found she was no longer hungry. She went home that night and stood at the bathroom mirror for a long time. Not because she thought she was unattractive. She was still beautiful. She knew this, empirically, the way a person knows a fact they do not have to feel grateful for. But beauty had not saved her. Beauty had fed her, quite literally. Beauty had entertained her and opened restaurant doors for her and carried her into rooms she had not earned entrance to through any other quality. But it had not built anything. It had not softened her heart. It had not taught her how to love well. It had not made her trustworthy. It had not made her someone a good man would choose to grow old beside. And beauty, she realized with a sudden and cold clarity, was on a clock. She was 35. She called her mother the next morning. Her mother, Lorraine Carter, was 61 and had worked as a medical biller for over 20 years. She had been married once to Jennifer's father, and that marriage had ended when Jennifer was 9. Not dramatically, not with violence, but with the slow accumulation of incompatibility and poor communication and 2 people who had never learned to pour into each other before the wells ran dry. Jennifer's father was a decent man who sent child support on time and who called on birthdays. He had remarried and had 2 more children. He was not the villain of the story. He was just someone her mother hadn't been able to build with and who hadn't been able to build with her. And both of them had been shaped by things they'd never examined. Jennifer had never asked her mother much about it. She asked now, "What went wrong with you and Daddy?" A long pause. She could hear her mother setting something down. "We didn't give each other much," her mother said finally. "We both sort of waited for the other one to start giving first, and neither of us ever started." Jennifer held the phone and sat with that. "Did you love him?" "I thought love was a feeling," her mother said. "I didn't understand it was a practice. By the time I understood that, we'd already built habits that were too comfortable to break. It's easier to keep waiting than to start giving when you're not sure you'll get anything back." Jennifer thought of the tulips Marcus had brought her, the way she had stopped answering his calls because he suggested she pick up dessert. "Mom," she said, "do you think I'm like that?" Her mother was quiet for a moment, not the silence of someone who didn't know the answer. "I think," her mother said carefully, "that you learn to protect yourself so well that you don't know how to lower the shield even when there's no enemy in front of you. I think you mistake generosity for vulnerability. And I think part of that is my fault because I didn't model something different." That was the most honest thing her mother had ever said to her. Jennifer did not cry on the phone. She waited until she had said goodbye and sat with it alone. Then she cried for a long time. Not the hot, indignant tears of the night after Isaiah's dinner, but something slower and colder. The kind of crying that happens when a person finally allows themselves to understand something they have been avoiding. Change, when it comes honestly, is neither fast nor clean. It does not happen in a single good cry, or a single hard conversation, or a single revelation in a bathroom mirror. It happens in small and painful increments, mostly invisible to everyone except the person enduring them. Jennifer stopped running the system. Not overnight, not completely, but she began by doing something small and genuinely painful. She stopped going on dates she had no intention of reciprocating. She stopped using the apps as a meal procurement mechanism. When she went on a date, she went because she was interested in the person, and when she was not interested, she said so after the first meeting, rather than stringing the connection along for the food. She reached for her purse on the second date with a man named Solomon, a high school principal she had met through a mutual colleague. He was not wealthy. He was not the kind of man she had built her system to attract. But he was thoughtful and funny and talked about his students the way a person talks about something that matters. When she reached for her purse, he looked surprised. Not offended, just surprised. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," she said. She left the restaurant feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time, unindebted, not transaction-free, genuinely unindebted, like a woman who had given something real rather than taken something free. She started cooking properly, not as a performance of domesticity, but as a practice of giving. She cooked for Kezia and Tamara, hosted small dinners at her apartment on weekend evenings, learned to think about what other people might want to eat rather than only what she wanted to be given. It was a small thing. It meant something large. She called the electrician, Marcus, once, just to apologize. He did not need to hear it for his own healing. He had moved on completely, was married now with a child. But Jennifer needed to say it, because part of changing is naming what you did. He received the apology graciously, without cruelty, the way a man who has genuinely let something go receives acknowledgement of it. She started therapy, which she had resisted for years because vulnerability felt like a room she might not be able to leave once she entered it. Her therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Osei, who did not perform warmth but possessed it, helped Jennifer trace the origin of the system, the early money anxiety, the father who left, the mother who had modeled scarcity of emotional expression, the genuine periods of financial stress that had turned a coping mechanism into a way of being. "You weren't wrong that you needed to survive," Dr. Osei said once. "You were wrong about what survival looked like. You confused consumption with safety." Jennifer wrote that down. She wrote a lot of things down in those years. The changes were real, but they were also slow, and some consequences, this was the harsher lesson, do not vanish simply because you finally understand them. Some patterns leave marks on how others perceive you, on what men sense about you, before you have finished explaining who you are now. Some futures, once forfeited, do not become available again. She turned 37, she turned 38, she turned 39, and the birthday dinner Kezia threw for her was full of genuine laughter, and Jennifer sat in the middle of it and genuinely felt, not performed, grateful. Not for the dinner, for the people at the table. For Kezia, who had told her hard truths and stayed anyway. For Tamara, who had prayed for her quietly and consistently for years. For her mother, who was healthier now and came to visit twice a year. For her brother Darius, who had gotten his own life together in his 30s and who had started calling her just to talk, without a situation attached. For all of it. She saw Isaiah one last time in a way that truly mattered. It was a Saturday in May, the kind of morning that Atlanta occasionally produces before the summer heat becomes relentless. Warm, but not yet punishing, a breeze moving through the oak trees that line the older streets. Jennifer was at a community arts festival downtown, There because a colleague had mentioned it, and because she had been making an effort to do things that were not primarily about being seen, things she might actually enjoy simply for the experience of enjoying them. She was eating a mango sorbet from a paper cup and looking at a photographer's booth, large prints of Atlanta neighborhoods, corner stores, elderly men playing dominoes on stoops, children at fire hydrants, when she felt the awareness of someone nearby. She turned. Isaiah was pushing a stroller. Beside him, walking with her hand looped lightly through his free arm, was the woman from the window table, his wife. Jennifer knew it before she saw the ring, knew it in the particular harmony of how they moved together, unhurried, speaking to each other with the ease of people who had been having the same conversation in different registers for years. 2 children. A boy, maybe 4 years old, who had Isaiah's forehead and his mother's wide eyes, currently in spirited pursuit of a soap bubble that had drifted from a nearby vendor's cart. A girl in a floral sun hat, perhaps 2, riding in the stroller with a small stuffed rabbit and the magnificent serenity of the well-loved young. Isaiah's wife was wearing linen, cream-colored, loose, elegant in the effortless way of clothing chosen for comfort and also beautiful. Her hair was pulled back. She wore no jewelry except her wedding ring and small gold studs. She looked like a woman who had nothing to prove to the world and had arrived at that conclusion through something other than indifference, through a settled sense of herself that Jennifer had spent years performing and never actually achieving. She looked, above everything else, content, not triumphant, not impressed with herself, content in the way of a person whose daily life matches what they actually value. Isaiah saw Jennifer. He paused for a moment. His expression did not change into anything complicated. He did not look guilty or wary or satisfied. He simply looked at her, the way you look at someone you knew once, who you wish well, who occupies a small and finished chapter of your story. He nodded, a simple, unhurried nod. No bitterness, no gloating, just peace. His wife followed his eyes naturally, without suspicion, and offered Jennifer a small smile, the warm, uncomplicated smile of a woman who trusted her husband and therefore had no reason to treat another woman as a threat, the smile of someone who had never learned to perform. That kindness nearly broke Jennifer more than cruelty would have. The little boy came running back with the bubble gone and a new enthusiasm for a dog he had spotted 20 feet away. Isaiah caught him without looking, one smooth motion, scooped him up and said something into his ear that made the boy dissolve into laughter. His wife touched the little girl's cheek in the stroller, and the girl grabbed her finger and held it. Then they moved on, into the festival, into their Saturday, into their life. Jennifer stood with her sorbet, which had begun to melt, and watched them until the crowd folded around them and they were gone. She found a bench near the fountain at the center of the festival grounds and sat down. Around her, the day continued without needing her input. A little girl with her face painted like a butterfly ran past. A food truck with hand-lettered signage served jerk chicken to a line of patient people. A quartet of college-aged musicians played something that was not quite jazz and not quite anything else, and it was good. A grandmother moved slowly through the photographer's booth, studying each print. Jennifer sat and, for the first time in her adult life, did not make excuses. She did not blame men who hadn't been good enough. She did not blame the city or the dating market or the particular cruelty of being a beautiful woman whom people assumed had it easy. She did not blame poverty or her parents or timing or bad luck. These things had been real. The financial struggle had been real. The fear had been real. The father who left had been real. The mother who had not modeled generosity had been real. The circumstances that created the system had been real. But she had made choices. She had made them repeatedly, over years, past the point of necessity, past the point of survival, into the territory of character. And character, once formed, does not undo itself just because you feel sorry about it. She had treated human beings like temporary utilities with conversation attached. She had mistaken being desired for being valuable. She had believed that because she could attract provision, she deserved covenant. But covenant asks for character. It asks for self-control, gratitude, humility, generosity, mutual care, and the willingness to pour back into the very people who pour into you. It asks for the kind of woman who reaches across a window table and pays. Not because she has to, not to make a point, but simply because she wants to give something to the person across from her. Jennifer had not been that woman at 28. She was trying, at 39, to become her. And that mattered. That was real. The change was real. The therapy was real. The growth was real. The apology to Marcus had been real. The meals she now cooked for friends who had cooked for her for years were real. The reach for the purse on the second date with Solomon had been real. But real change and forfeited futures are not mutually exclusive. Both can be true at once. Isaiah and his wife and his children and his Saturday were a whole future she had stepped around without knowing she was stepping around it. Not only Isaiah specifically, but the version of a life available to a woman who begins early to practice generosity and trust and the willingness to be known. Some doors close and stay closed, but they are not the only doors. And understanding why they closed, really understanding it, without defensiveness, without excuse, is the first requirement for standing honestly in front of whatever door is still open. Jennifer finished her sorbet. She sat in the May sunshine for a while longer, in no hurry, watching people move through the festival with varying degrees of happiness and purpose. She watched a couple navigate a disagreement quietly and reach a resolution without drama. She watched a young woman, about 23 or 24, photograph everything with a phone, as Jennifer herself had once photographed restaurant meals she had not paid for, and she felt something that was neither contempt nor nostalgia, but something in between, the complex tenderness of recognizing yourself in someone who hasn't learned yet what you know now. She hoped the young woman would learn faster. She hoped someone would tell her clearly enough and she would hear it. The story does not end with Jennifer starving or ruined. It does not end with her alone in the full catastrophic sense. She has Kezia and Tamara, her mother, her brother Darius, her colleagues, a small and genuine life she has built by hand in the years since she stopped waiting for someone else to build it. At 41, she will meet a man named Arthur at a book club she joins, mostly because her therapist suggests community activities, and partly because she has started reading again for the first time since college. Arthur is a civil engineer, divorced, with a teenage son who spends weekends with him. He is not as striking as Isaiah. He is steady and steady-tempered and thinks carefully before he speaks and has a habit of leaving small notes on the refrigerator, on the windshield of her BMW, on the inside cover of a book he finishes and then hands to her. He is the kind of man she would have dismissed at 30 without a second glance, and she knows this about herself, and it is a humbling knowledge. She does not marry him quickly. She does not marry him because he is the best available option or because a particular birthday has frightened her into urgency. She marries him because she has learned, slowly and at real cost, what it means to choose a person rather than a circumstance. Because she has learned that love is a practice and a daily decision and a willingness to give on the days when you would rather receive. Because when he has a hard day, she no longer becomes bored. She asks questions, she brings food, she stays. They build something together. It is not the life Jennifer imagined at 28, not the aspirational fantasy assembled from Instagram images and the wrong definition of deserving. It is better, actually. It is real. It is imperfect and warm and requires daily renewal and occasional repair, and it is better. She thinks sometimes of the system, of the years of free dinners and the men who deserved more than she gave them, of Marcus and his tulips, of the electrician who drove 40 minutes 3 times and brought flowers because she once mentioned she liked old-fashioned things. She thinks of Isaiah and the rooftop and the jazz bar and the dinner where he said what needed to be said and then left with devastating gentleness. She is grateful, eventually, for all of it. Not because pain is good, but because from far enough away, she can see that every difficult thing moved her, slowly, resistingly, sometimes against her will, toward the woman she needed to become. The dinners she did not pay for cost her something she could not measure in dollars. The dinners she later paid for gave her something money had never given her, the clean, uncomplicated feeling of a woman who has enough to give. She learned too late in one sense and exactly on time in another. The timing was not what she would have chosen, but the lesson was real and the life was real, and the love, when it finally came and stayed, was real. And the final understanding, the one she carries with her long after the festival, long after the bench, long after the mango sorbet has melted and the soap bubble has popped and the boy with Isaiah's smile has grown tall. Taking can fill a plate. Only giving, rightly ordered and wisely given, generous without martyrdom and reciprocal without keeping score, can build a life. Trust is wealth. Character is wealth. Reciprocity is wealth. A peaceful home is wealth. A good name is wealth. A faithful spouse and healthy children are wealth. A life where love flows both directions is wealth. And no one, not anyone, not ever, should make a business model out of using hearts to pay for hunger. Jennifer knows this now. She wishes she had known it sooner. She is grateful she knows it at all.